Revenge is a dish that is served cold.
My boss tried to seduce my fiancée and paid the price for it.
It happened a few years ago, but I still remember every moment of it as if it happened yesterday. My boss was the perfect example of a type A personality. He didn't just like controlling everything around him, he thrived on it. He could manipulate people for his own amusement, build his career on others' mistakes, and showed no mercy. He was always at the center of attention, doing everything to stay in that position, despite his moral ambiguity. It was no secret that his marriage was falling apart. Everyone knew he had many affairs, and his wife remained oblivious, consumed by her own career elsewhere. I became the center of his attention when I started a relationship with a girl from another office. We couldn't see each other often because of the distance, but these relationships were meaningful to me. Of course, my boss found out and, as expected, he tried to use this against me. He was ruthless and couldn't stand the idea that anyone could be above him, even in personal matters. When he went on a business trip to the office where my girlfriend worked, he tried to push her into spending the night with him. She refused, and that set him off. He made up false accusations and had her fired, claiming that she had violated company policies and failed in her duties. But, of course, I wasn't going to just sit idly by. I knew this man would stop at nothing to cover up his wrongdoings, and I knew where he kept his secrets. He was so confident in himself that he always kept compromising photographs in the office, to avoid any uncomfortable situations with his wife. I knew that if I got my hands on those photos, I could make him pay for everything. One day, when he was out of the office, I found out that the janitor had accidentally left his office door open. I knew this could be my last chance. I went into his office, pretending to search for some documents for work. I peeked into his desk and found several stacks of photos. Some of them showed him with women who were clearly not his wife. At that moment, I realized I could use these photos in a much more effective way than just sending them to his wife. I wasn't going to waste time with petty revenge. I decided to go big. Instead of just sending the photos anonymously in an envelope, I took it further. I found some old business connections of his that could still be useful to him, and I wrote a few anonymous messages. In these letters, I informed them that these materials could end up in his wife's hands if he didn't stop his dirty game. I also included links to his connections with other women he had been trying to hide. But most importantly, I sent the photos with a detailed account of his affairs, not only to his personal address but also to companies he did business with. I knew this information would cause a real scandal. It worked. Of course, his wife found out about his affairs and filed for divorce. But that wasn't the end. Thanks to coordinated efforts with journalists and his business partners, the information about his secret relationships and low moral character quickly became public knowledge. His reputation was destroyed in an instant, and all his business ties fell apart. Soon, he was fired from his job, and his life started spiraling down. He couldn't recover from the blow. He lost not only his wife and career but almost everything tied to his image of being successful and influential. Time passed, my girlfriend became my wife, and we finally found peace and happiness. But I'll never forget how easily and mercilessly one can ruin a person's life, especially someone who thought they were untouchable. Revenge, though harsh, always finds its mark, and in this case, I knew he would regret every step he took. I got fired, but walked away with a year's pay and my boss lost their job.
This happened in the mid-2010s when I was just starting out in digital marketing, and the opportunities for creating quality content were limited. I was hired as a strategic marketer at a large tech company that wanted to launch an aggressive social media campaign. The salary was impressive for my age, around $12,000 a month, but the work turned out to be much more challenging than I expected. The entire campaign involved creating numerous ad materials, videos, graphics, and texts, all of which had to be done in a tight time frame. On my second day, my manager, Eric, introduced me to my KPI: 250 pieces of content, including videos, posts, banners, etc., over 50 weeks. I immediately realized this was absolutely impossible for one person. I was expected to write ad copy, shoot and edit videos, create graphics, manage social media, and also produce reports on the campaign's progress. The company didn't have the necessary equipment, so I used my own gear and software, as their equipment simply couldn't handle the workload, even for basic 1080p videos. When I told Eric that this workload was unmanageable for a single person, he just smiled and said, "Try your best, and if the content is good, we'll focus on quality." I agreed to try. The first month was tough, but I managed to keep up, despite the enormous workload. However, one day, when Eric found out I smoked, his attitude toward me changed overnight. My colleague, Karen, immediately informed me that Eric had always been against smokers and had often tried to fire anyone who smoked. From that point, he started nitpicking everything I did, from smelling like cigarettes after breaks to being 10 minutes late, even though I was working over 12 hours a day. This went on, but I endured it because I just wanted to do my job well. After 6 months, I was called into the office by the CEO of the company, Jennifer. I immediately felt something was off. She had a stern look on her face, and I felt a knot in my stomach. Jennifer told me she was disappointed because she heard I was falling behind in my work, and half the year had already passed, with only 90 pieces completed out of the 250 expected. I tried to explain that I had been working non-stop, 70 to 80 hours a week, and that it was simply impossible for one person to handle such a load. At the same time, all the content I had released was attracting huge attention and engagement on social media. I also reminded her that Eric had said quality was more important than quantity. Jennifer dismissed my explanation and stated that the KPIs were non-negotiable, and since I was behind, she felt it would be best to part ways. When I asked how they were planning to meet the goals if they were firing me, Eric sneered and said, "We'll find an agency to finish your work." Jennifer nodded in support and said that she trusted Eric would handle it. That's when an idea sparked in my mind. As a strategic marketer, one of my tasks was to maintain a database of production houses in case we needed extra resources for shooting. I figured they'd use the agencies from my database since Eric didn't have any contacts in that industry. So, I changed all the contact details in the database, swapping phone numbers and email addresses, leaving only one. My good friend, Mark, worked at a successful agency that specialized in producing commercial videos. I called him, explained the situation, and proposed a profitable plan. I told him that if his agency took on the project, they'd quickly gain a lot of clients, and I would earn a commission for bringing them in. Mark agreed, and they immediately connected with the agency's general manager. Understanding that this project would be highly lucrative, the manager quickly agreed and drafted a contract. Within a few weeks, it was clear that Mark's agency was doing an excellent job. They produced videos that perfectly matched the company's style and attracted the target audience. Eric and Jennifer were amazed by the results and signed a contract with them on the spot. Considering each video they produced cost 5 times more than my monthly salary, the company was able to release new content every few days. So, yes, Mark's agency produced 100 pieces of content in 4 months, costing more than $500,000, over 40 times my annual salary. Meanwhile, thanks to my 15% commission, I earned nearly $75,000, which was 5 times my salary. I used the money for a well-deserved vacation and continued my education at a prestigious marketing school abroad. My plan had worked, but 6 months later, while I was vacationing in the Maldives, Karen called me. She informed me that Eric had been fired, and Jennifer had been heavily criticized by the university chancellor. The content creation project, for which I was hired, had a budget that was about 10 times the original budget, and they had exceeded that by more than 10 times. Eric had been so desperate to finish the project that he disregarded caution, paying any amount to get the job done and trying to show Jennifer that he completed the project, even though he hadn't received approval from the higher-ups. And that's how I helped my friend get a quick promotion to director at his production company and a high salary, after I was unfairly let go from my job.
The infidelity of my beloved wife, revenge.
In the early 2010s, I started noticing strange behavior from my wife. We had one child, around 4 years old, and although he was still young, he could talk about his day. What raised my suspicions was that my wife often mentioned leaving him with her parents, who lived in another town. This struck me as odd, since it was about an hour and a half drive to their place, and she started going there almost every day. When I asked her about it, She reassured me that everything was fine, but I knew she wasn't a great liar. I began tracking the mileage on her car, and soon I found out she was driving about 300 extra miles a week. That was suspicious. One night, when she left her phone on the table, I couldn't resist and checked her messages. I found a series of texts between her and her friend, where they discussed how my wife was regularly meeting up with one of her old boyfriends. The messages didn't go into details about him, but she had no problem mocking his wife for putting on weight after having kids. I took screenshots of the conversation and saved them for later, realizing I needed more information. I reached out to a friend who worked as a cop, and he recommended a private investigator named Victor. I paid him a retainer, gave him everything I knew, and he quickly got to work. A while later, Victor gave me a report, complete with photos and timestamps, showing exactly what my wife was doing. He tracked her movements, revealing that she would drop our child off at her parents' house, then meet this guy for lunch, and afterward, they would go to a cheap motel for a few hours. She would then pick up our child and return home like nothing had happened. Once I had all the information, I knew I had to file for divorce. I grew up in a household where cheating was the norm, and it ruined my childhood. I wasn't going to let that happen to my child. I also asked Victor to dig deeper into this guy's life. He found out his name was Michael, he had a wife and 2 kids, and he worked as a VP in a large sales company. It all seemed a bit too coincidental. I had my lawyer prepare the divorce papers and requested some extra copies of the report from Victor. But there was one more thing I wanted him to do. On the same day, I served my wife the divorce papers at her work. I had Victor meet with Michael's wife and show her everything he had uncovered. I thought she deserved to know the truth, and what she did with that information was her choice. The fallout was intense. Michael's wife immediately took their kids and moved out. According to court documents, she drained their joint account and filed for divorce. When her father found out, he had Michael fired from the company. Since Michael and his wife had been living in a house owned by her parents, they kicked him out too. Their divorce became a battlefield. Things got even uglier when Michael showed up at his wife's house to talk, and a confrontation turned physical. Her brother stepped in, and Michael ended up with a broken nose. After that, there were court orders, police reports, criminal charges, and even jail time. I never heard from Michael again. The last I checked, he had disappeared, leaving the state and vanishing from the internet entirely. His ex-wife, on the other hand, took a job at her father's company and rebuilt her life. As for me, my ex and I kept things civil for the sake of our child. Now that he's grown, I haven't spoken to her in years. I don't hate her, but she's only important to me as the mother of my child. Beyond that, she no longer holds any relevance in my life.